Have that experience together. I didn't know.
I know.
I
See,
didn't know.
we talked
So we're
about
meant to be
it.
besties.
Yes.
Number two, I was gonna ask you, how has motherhood changed you? What do you feel? How has it changed you as a person?
Well, I mean, definitely.
You're a working mom, so
Yeah, I would say definitely she's my top priority.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think you got to be careful though, because your husband should actually come before your child. So that's tricky.
That's very tricky for me too.
I do love Brian, and I have to remember he came first. And I think that's common for moms, because when you've got a little child, especially after everything you've been through with them, it's like you just want to provide and protect. You know, I think early on I was so thankful I could pump and give her breast milk for like the first year of her life, and then I was really intentional on her food. Like I made all of her baby food from scratch.
What? You were those moms?
I was one of those.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of it and a little bit of like, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone does the best they can. I mean, I'm not perfect at everything. That was just the one thing I wanted to make sure I was setting her up for success in her health. And you know, what was nice is I was working from home, and, you know, going back to what you're saying about timing and career, like had I had her 10 years prior, she probably would have been in daycare 10 hours a day and raised by someone else. And thankfully, because I was older and more established in my career, I was working from home. And so either myself, my husband, or my mom were always with her, or other family members. But thankfully, we didn't have to send her to daycare. Then eventually she went to preschool, but I was still working from home, and like COVID hit, and so we were all virtual. And so it changed me in the sense that I got to spend a lot of time with her and really soak up those days with her. And even now, looking at pictures of her as a baby, it's like it goes so fast. And I remember people would say that, and I'm like, well, thankfully I'm with her every day, so I'm not gonna like miss out on anything. But I would say that, you know, having a child and seeing the world through the eyes of a child is just so precious. You know, having them during the holidays, seeing all their milestones, when they light up and they learn new things, it just is like sunshine to my soul. And I would have missed out on all of that had I never become a mom. So I'm really thankful.
And just them telling you, I love you. I love you, mommy.
I know.
Whoa.
She'll say,
just like,
you're the best mom in the whole world.
I know.
I love you. And, you know, because I'm older too, I really am intentional in how I parent her, different than the last generation. You know, I learned a lot from the good and the bad of my own upbringing. And I came from, you know, a split family, and I was really intentional about not putting my child through that. So I'm thankful that I waited and found the right husband, a man of God. Seriously, like, I don't think we'd be together without God. So that was really important to me, to put God first in my marriage and in motherhood.
I love that. I love it. Motherhood does change people. I think for me, I again resonate with the things you say, but even more so, I never knew I could love anyone the way I love my kid. And so on protective mode 24/7. Like I have her back 24/7. You know what I mean? Like,
you're very
I'm a very
protective mom.
Very protective mom. And it's good and bad, because sometimes it's okay for them to run and fall and get hurt, and you know, have people, you know, have them be in the real world. You know what I mean? It's
hard.
never it's not also good to overprotect, because they'll never learn to protect themselves out in the real world.
Right.
People are gonna be people. Even as grown-ups, I still find there are some people who are just not nice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
At our age, which I was like, man. But even that, because of all the things you've learned, you've gone through and learned how to navigate, you know, it's like, okay, you're not that great, but one out of maybe 1,000 people is not amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then I learned how to navigate that. But if you don't show your kid how to navigate the negatives too,
Right.
it's not good for her.
Right.
It's not helping her.
You're
You
not
know what I mean?
equipping her.
Yeah, and falling and breaking their little legs here and there. Not breaking their legs, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like them going
accidents
through
happen.
stuff,
Right.
you know?
And I think too, to add on how I was changed when I became a mom is, I think that you relive your own stuff through your kids.
Ooh.
You know, like I remember when she was maybe like 3 or 4, I worried a lot about kids being mean to her at the playground or the beach. And I'm like, okay, that's your stuff, because I mean, kids are going to be kids. They're going to be mean.
Yeah.
But maybe like there's something I need to work on with my own childhood. Maybe kids were mean to me and I need to resolve that, because it may not be her issue.
Yeah.
And she may not be aware of it, you know? Now, if she's coming to me saying, you know, I'm getting bullied, okay, let's talk about it. And so, you know, equipping them with the skills or stepping in when you have to. And that's a fine line too, because it's like, what is their fight to fight? What is your fight to fight for them? And I remember sitting on a plane once, because I traveled a lot for work, next to a child psychologist. And I said to her, or asked her, what's the best advice you could give a parent? And she said, think of your adult child that you want and think of 5 traits you want them to have. So for me, it'd probably be like decisive, independent, a leader, free thinker, faithful. Let's just say that's it. So I'm going to give her tasks as a child and even as a baby to feed those 5 traits. So decisive is one. So I would give her choices in her food. I'd say, you want strawberries or blueberries? And I would always give her choices. Now, my husband hated that, because he's like, just tell her to eat strawberries, you know? And I'm like, well, there's like studies that show they feel more in control if they have a choice. I also hated it whenever you would shame a kid by saying, you're a bad girl, you're a bad boy. And so I'd say, that's not a good choice. That's a good choice. That's a healthy choice. That's a safe choice. And I remember we were in McKenna at a friend's house, and they had a big pool, and she was about 2 years old, and she was walking around the pool, and there was a ledge that she could walk across, and she said out loud to herself, that's not a safe choice. And my husband heard it, and he's like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like, now I get it. So now he uses that with her too. So yeah, I think just being aware of your own stuff versus their stuff, things you need to work on. And maybe we have triggers, you know, in ourselves that have nothing to do with them. But then that's hard, because then you realize later, like, wow, I just got really upset over that, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Or why was I so upset? You know, why did I snap at her? And so, you know, coming back and apologizing is always good too.
I know. I never grew up with any of the parents growing up who are like, I'm really sorry about disciplining you or whatever. Like
yelling at you.
Yeah, no, or yelling or whatever. I never grew up that way.
Yeah.
This is our generation that is choosing to sometimes apologize and just knowing that you're not always right. You know, yes, you're a parent. And sometimes you're really in a bad mood or you're angry and you're projecting that on your child who is innocent.
Right.
And yes, they might have done something, but your reaction is a little bit, you know, out there, and it's just not matching what they did. You know what I mean? It's like way beyond, you know, and learning to say, I'm really sorry. Or mommy's having a really tough day today. I'm really sorry. I learned to do that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I never did that before. But I forgot, I never used to give her like a lot of choices in you know, growing, when she was younger. I used to be like, you're doing this or you're doing this. You know what I mean? You're doing this, you know, because I grew up that way. And in a way, is it good or bad? It's good to give kids choices. And I've started doing it later on in her life, but my child is 10. Well, she's still young.
And I think there's a time and place for both. Like, I remember talking to my friend Cindy, and she's saying, well, there's an ask and there's a tell. So you can ask them to put on their shoes, and if they don't listen, at some point you got to tell them, because the house is burning down. We got to go,
Yeah.
you know, or forget the shoes. We're running out the door.
I know. It's like, oh, the fire's burning. Do you want to leave or do you want to stay there?
Do you want red shoes
want
or
red
blue shoes?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And the misconceptions of motherhood that you had?
So I think, you know, I said to myself I was going to raise her like it was the 1970s, no electronics, you know, super healthy, natural. I think I stayed away from electronics maybe for 2 years.
Yeah.
But I didn't even like her watching TV when she was a baby. And then I got to the point where I was like, I need to make dinner, watch a movie, you know? And so I don't think it's something I would like endorse having them on technology all the time, but I am definitely more, I guess, forgiving or lax sometimes, because sometimes you just got to get through the day and it's tough. You know,
Yes.
if you're home alone with your kid and you need a minute or you're going to have a meltdown, you know, sometimes you need technology to step in. And there's, you know, tools you can use for education and it can be good. I would say, you know, be careful what they're watching. There's some good apps like Yippee and Menno, which are faith-based, and so it's better than like YouTube. But that's something I was kind of judgmental about before having kids. And then when I had her, I was like, honestly, can we just have a nice dinner?
I know.
You know, at whatever steakhouse, and get through the day.
I know.
So that's something I've compromised on a little bit.
One of the things that I believed I would never do, just like my dear friend here, is also electronics. I was very sure that my kid is going to be those kids who are going to be playing piano and, you know, reading books and sitting there until I tell her, hey, you know what? It's okay for you to watch something on TV for a little bit, and then you sit back after 20 minutes and you're done. And that was my my idea of how my motherhood was going to look like. And then God gave me a kid who was super hyper, ADHD beyond. So, and for her, I feel rewards has to be something that she really, really, really loves. And I think for her, like watching her favorite show is a great reward. And also for kids who are busy, kids with ADHD or any sort of like issue, I think ADHD is ADD even, some who have ADD or ADHD, they're so busy, and unless you're 3 people, one person cannot sit with them and make them do everything every time for the whole day. Like you have to be realistic. And I think those moments when you have for yourself to regroup and for them to also enjoy watching something that they want to watch, I think for me it's not a big deal. I'm not judgmental anymore. I used to be, but I'm not. And if your child doesn't have any of is somebody who's very quiet and doesn't have any special anything, like doesn't have ADD or ADHD. Those are the 2 things that I feel like kids are so busy that you can't control them 24/7. You just can't. So if your kid is like that, don't ever feel guilty. Don't care what people say if you're giving your child a little bit of, you know, iPad time.
One thing I learned too is like every kid's different. You know, and they all have different temperaments. So there's a spectrum of special needs, then there's temperaments. And then there's learning styles. And then there's personalities, and then you have your own temperament, and then your husband has his temperament, and then you have your own upbringing and cultures, and so there's so many layers to parenting that I don't judge anyone. I mean, unless you're like physically abusing your child and we need to help you and the situation and step in, there's certain things where, you know, people need to step in, but if it's just like a philosophical difference or a way that someone's parenting, you know, there's so many factors at play.
So parents, it's okay to parent how you're parenting, provided you're doing what's best for your child. And finding what works for your family. I always say that, what works for your family. a lot of us, and I also believe that I have a little bit of ADD, undiagnosed, obviously. And I think a lot of my friends, when you're watching someone, you're like, oh my gosh, you are so scatterbrained. You have no idea, you probably have ADHD, or a little bit, dyslexia is something people don't even notice they have. They're wondering why, well, it was 1,000, was it 001, is it, you know what I mean? And they don't even have an idea, because growing up, we were never, not we were never. For the most part, unless it's something super severe, yeah, people just were like, yeah, I'm just a little bit, busy. No, you have some things. But we've grown up and figured out how to maneuver life and how to navigate life. And our kids will too, If it's something overly severe, it's still okay. There's so much help out there and so much, so many resources in this day and age as opposed to when we were growing up. So you'll be fine. If you want to give your kid a little bit of iPad time, now if you give your kid iPad all day, maybe that's not great.
Yeah.
But if you're using it for breaks, that's okay. If you're using it for drives or you're using, I don't mind that. But just try and minimize it as much as you can. But don't feel guilty if you're using that stuff to help with your kid.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about Carol, she and I will take our girls out for play dates where technology is not even possible. I mean, I like to go places where there's no internet and you have to run and play and climb trees and be in nature. And so, I like to call them brain breaks sometimes. Like, you kind of have to give your brain a break. And we do it. I mean, we're on our phones. And so it's like just learning how to navigate that well. But we're all different, and every kid's different. If you have 5 kids, you're probably going to parent each of them differently because of what's effective for them.
Absolutely. So, Leana, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
Been chatting away. She's a friend, so it's so easy to chat with her. I can chat with her all day.
Yes, thank you.
Really, and our kids like each other, and she helps me out a lot because I never think of some parenting things, and she was like, yeah, I don't do this, so I help. Like, for example, when you're talking about even just how you parent Melanie and the things you allow her to do or not to do, I learn a lot from you by just how I observe how you parent her, and I'm like, oh, that's really, it works, right? I'm seeing the kid is doing great. Even disciplining her. There's a way you say, don't make it a negative. You can say the same thing, try and avoid a particular situation by saying something that will be positive and not necessarily negative.
Right. I think it's called positive parenting.
Positive parenting.
Yeah.
So for example, she genuinely does that.
Yeah. So for example, if you don't want the kids to jump on the couch, you say, "Oh, can you please keep your feet on the ground?" So you're saying it in a positive way instead of like, don't jump on the couch.
You're messing up my stuff. So whenever I'm with her, I'm like, oh, that's a good one. That's a good way of parenting. I'd love to try that.
And sometimes it works, and sometimes you have to pivot. So.
And even if you do, it's fine. And even for me, I think it's the way you start. At some point, you might end up saying, no. I think it's time for us to not do that anymore. But it's after you've done all the positive, what do you call it?
Parenting.
Positive parenting. Like how you've started off with a positive way of reinforcing something. And then at some point, you're like, you know what? I'm going to be a little tougher. But it works. The kid's thriving.
Thank you. Well, it's been a village. I haven't learned everything on my own. I have really good friends, and one of my good friends is a behavioral analyst, so she helped me a lot when Melanie was little with just being more actually hands-on, because I was a little, I would say, passive in the sense where I'd be like, don't do that. She's like, sometimes you have to get up and actually physically put your hands on them and be like, okay, we're going to stop. And then you redirect. And so, yeah, I learn a lot. I mean, it can be overwhelming. There's so much information out there. So you just do what feels best to you and
what works.
See what works for your kids.
I know. So, yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me. And I always say I'm not the expert in parenting or motherhood. What I do is bring a lot of people who know something that could help one of you moms out there. And I'm sure from listening to my dear friend, Leana, you've learned something, right? So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You'll come back again.
Yes,
we have a lot more to talk about.
I would be happy to.
All right, and happy holidays.
Same to you.
All right, mahalo, everyone. We're about to go into Thanksgiving. happy Thanksgiving, and then happy holidays. Bye.
Bye.